In front of 30,000 people, a famous singer mocked a black president just because he flew economy class and wore a cheap suit. But within 7 minutes of taking the microphone, he brought the entire stadium to utter silence and left many in tears. What happened on that stage? And how did a barefoot child change the way the world saw him forever? Ouagadougou, the dusty, sun-scorched capital of Burkina Faso, woke up to its usual slow rhythm. The sputter of old motorbikes echoed beneath rows of palm trees. A few birds circled lazily in the misty dawn, and the morning sun dragged itself across rusted tin rooftops. At the heart of the city stood a government building. No electric fences, no armed guards at the gates. It was a far cry from the fortress-like residences of other heads of state. And inside, President Ibrahim Traoré was beginning his workday. Not in a polished boardroom surrounded by advisors, not behind a massive desk with assistants hovering nearby. He sat alone in a modest office. The walls, once white, had faded with the sun. A ceiling fan creaked above. His desk, a simple slab of wood, was covered in thick folders. The only sign of power here was the orderliness. He signed off on reports about food distribution, the rising number of out-of-school children in the north, and the families surviving in makeshift refugee camps. Then his eyes lingered on a photo, a skinny, barefoot boy standing alone in front of a collapsed classroom. The child wasn't crying, wasn't smiling. He just stared into the camera, with the quiet, unflinching look of someone who has learned to survive in silence. Traoré adjusted the photo gently, almost as if afraid that if it tilted even slightly, the balance of his entire day would shift. The soft buzz of his phone snapped him out of thought. A brief message appeared. No pleasantries, no flair. Invitation to Afro Star charity concert in Lagos, Nigeria. Pan-African broadcast featuring top artists across the continent. He read it twice. His expression didn't change. These flashy concerts, in his experience, came laced with hollow speeches and showy suits. People smiled for the cameras, talked in polished sound bites, and called it changing the world. But again, his eyes returned to the photo. That boy had never seen a concert, never heard applause. But if Traoré could show up, not to bask in spotlights, but to tell a story, then maybe, just maybe, someone in the crowd would truly listen. He closed the phone and spoke firmly, quietly. Tell them I'll attend. A pause, then he added, no entourage, no motorcade, I'm going alone. Thursday afternoon, as continental leaders settled into plush business class seats aboard their private jets, Ibrahim Traoré stood in line at Security Gate 3 of Ouagadougou Airport. His suit was old and gray, frayed at the collar with a loose thread dangling from his left sleeve. His black leather shoes had dulled over time. No flag pin, no presidential seal. Nothing marked him as the leader of a nation, except the calm on his face and the steady gaze of someone who no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. He wasn't in a rush, nor did he linger. He moved like a regular civil servant heading out on duty. At the security scanner, no one batted an eye. The agent waved him through. No salutes, no questions. No one recognized the president of Burkina Faso. He picked a window seat in the boarding lounge. The late afternoon sun filtered through dust-speckled glass, casting long beams across the cracked stone floor. He didn't scroll his phone, didn't open a laptop, just pulled out a small notebook and a pen, jotting something down with slow, deliberate care, as if each word mattered. A young mother with 2 children sat nearby, stealing glances until she finally asked, "Do you work for the government?" Traoré looked up and offered a soft, distant smile. "Something like that," he said, and went back to writing. To her, he was just another middle-aged man, maybe a teacher, maybe someone in agriculture. On board, he sat in seat 23A, economy class, by the window. To his right, a teenager wearing oversized headphones laughed out loud at a Nigerian comedy show. On the other side, a man was already snoring before takeoff. Traoré leaned gently into the window, gazing at the sky that was now melting into orange. In his hand, he held the photo of the barefoot boy. He didn't look at it, just held it, as if keeping it close would keep him from forgetting why he was here. No one on that flight noticed him. No whispers, no curious looks. He was completely invisible in the middle of the world. And in that exact moment, when a man who holds the fate of a nation sat wedged between strangers in a faded suit, quietly clutching a photograph, the questions began to rise. Why would a man like him attend a celebrity-filled concert? Why alone without aides or bodyguards? Why avoid recognition entirely? And what was really waiting for him in Lagos? Perhaps even he didn't know the full answer. But he knew one thing, something was going to happen. And whatever it was, it wouldn't be for him. It would be for the boy in the photo. And for all those who've never had a stage, neither in life nor under lights. After nearly 3 hours squeezed into a narrow economy seat, the plane touched down on the scorching tarmac of Murtala Muhammad International Airport. Heat shimmered visibly above the runway, the kind that sticks to your skin and blurs the horizon. As the seatbelt sign pinged off and passengers scrambled to grab their belongings, Ibrahim Traoré stayed still for a moment, eyes steady, hands resting lightly on the seat in front of him. Then he stood, calmly bent down to pick up his small carry-on bag, old canvas with faded edges, and waited until the aisle cleared. He was among the last to step off. No one turned their head, no one paused to offer a handshake or a camera flash. A man who governed a nation walked into Nigeria's busiest airport like a forgotten traveler. There were no banners, no welcoming delegation, no sign that a world leader had arrived, just the quiet sound of shoes brushing against tile and the faint, distant hum of an airport intercom. At immigration, he stood behind a tired-looking businessman and a woman with a crying toddler. The officer barely looked up as he flipped open the passport. "Purpose of visit?" came the routine question. Traoré replied with the same simplicity he always chose in place of ceremony: attending a charity concert. The officer, uninterested, nodded, stamped the passport, and waved him through. No questions, no suspicions, just another African man in a rumpled suit, moving quietly through one of the continent's largest cities. Outside the terminal, he declined the offers from airport porters and taxi barkers. He hailed a regular cab, gave the driver the address of the stadium, and sank into the back seat. The cab smelled faintly of engine oil and dried sweat. The window wouldn't roll down fully, so he cracked it an inch and let the heavy Lagos air in. He didn't make phone calls. He didn't check the news. He simply watched the city blur past. Markets spilling onto sidewalks, children chasing each other barefoot across traffic medians, billboard after billboard flashing the AfroStar logo in bold neon. That night, the AfroStar charity concert was the epicenter of West African spectacle. The stadium, built for sports, had been transformed into a cathedral of lights and sound. Beams of white and blue shot into the air, moving like searchlights over a crowd of more than 30,000. Outside, rows of luxury cars glided toward the gates, each one spilling out stars and influencers in designer gowns, sequined suits, and enough cologne to choke a room. The cameras were ready, photographers called names, reporters thrust microphones forward, each voice trying to capture the night's glamour. It wasn't just a concert, it was a parade of self-congratulation, a declaration that the continent could party like anyone else, and that hope looked best in high heels and red lipstick. Amid all this, Ibrahim's taxi pulled up quietly to a service entrance near the far corner of the stadium. No one held the door for him. He paid the driver in cash, adjusted the strap of his bag, and walked straight to the ticket booth. When he handed over his printout, the young woman scanning tickets looked up, blinked twice, and hesitated. There was something about the way he stood, too composed to be average, too modest to be a VIP. But she said nothing, just scanned the barcode and gestured him through. Inside the arena, chaos reigned in organized fashion. Music blasted from massive speakers, lights strobed in pulses, and the crowd swayed in a hypnotic wave of sweat and adrenaline. Ibrahim weaved through a throng of fans holding light sticks and phones, finally reaching his seat. Front row, far left, a black plastic chair. He sat down, placing his bag beneath his legs, hands calmly folded in his lap. The stage loomed only a few feet away. From where he sat, he could see the marks on the floor where dancers were meant to hit their cues. He didn't try to hide, but he also didn't announce himself. A crew member brushed past him and glanced briefly, probably assumed he was a translator or maybe a low-level organizer. His suit was too plain, his shoes too scuffed, and his presence too silent for anyone to suspect he was a head of state. On stage, KJ Storm erupted onto the scene like a thunderclap. Clad in metallic silver, glasses dark as night, and flanked by two dancers moving like liquid fire, he owned the space with every note. The crowd responded in kind, screaming, singing, and filming every second. Behind Ibrahim, a cluster of online influencers held up ring lights and phones, shrieking into their live streams, "King KJ is killing it tonight!" It was a carnival of noise and motion, a celebration of image over substance, rhythm over reflection. Nobody suspected that the tone of the entire night would shift because of the man sitting silently just feet away from the spotlight. Midway through his third song, KJ held up his hand. The DJ faded the music. The lights dimmed until only a tight beam lit him up from above. He wiped sweat from his forehead and grinned. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, drawing out each word with practiced flair, "I've been told we've got a special guest tonight. A real VIP, a president no less." The crowd responded with a ripple of confused laughter. KJ squinted, shielding his eyes like he was searching for someone. "They say he flew economy. Row 23, seat A. Anybody confirm?" This time the crowd laughed louder. Some people clapped. Others turned to their neighbors, whispering in disbelief. "Is he serious? A president flying economy?" KJ kept going. "And the man's wearing what? What is that, a $40 suit? Real man of the people? Honestly, if I were him, I'd be too embarrassed to show up." He chuckled. A few rows joined him in laughter, but some didn't. A woman in the third row lowered her drink. A young journalist, mid-live stream, paused and looked up from her phone. On the far left of the front row, Ibrahim Traoré sat still, his face unchanged, his gaze unwavering. He didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't flinch. He simply looked at KJ with the quiet, heavy stillness of a man who had heard worse and learned to outlast it. KJ caught the stare, and something in his bravado faltered, not because of fear, but because the man before him didn't offer anger or shame. There was no wounded pride, no nervous laughter in return, just a gaze that asked, without words, "Are you proud of what you just said?" And in that unblinking silence, something shifted. KJ fumbled for another punchline. "Maybe someone should upgrade him to VIP," and he said, laughing a little too quickly. "Or maybe he just likes the cheap seats." This time the laugh was thinner, more polite than genuine. The woman in row 3 went quiet completely. One of the influencers stopped recording and slowly lowered her phone. The silence didn't start loud. It began in ripples, first a pause, then a quiet exchange of glances, then a few furrowed brows. Traoré remained still. He didn't change his posture. He didn't raise a hand. But in that stillness was a message louder than any speech. Not all silence is submission. Some silences are a mirror, reflecting back the shallowness of mockery and the emptiness of performative power. A few people began whispering, "Who is he? Wait, is he really a president? Why is he here alone?" What had started as a joke was now unraveling into discomfort. What had been funny became awkward. And from that awkwardness grew something heavier, something no one dared to name out loud: shame. KJ Storm was still waiting for the laugh. For performers, it's instinctive. A silence that lingers too long after a punchline is like a skipped heartbeat, a chuckle, a cheer, a whistle, anything to anchor the rhythm. But after his final jab about the economy seat and the $40 suit, what came back to him wasn't laughter. It was silence, and not the kind that invites more jokes. It was the kind of silence that sits on a room like stone, heavy, unmovable, and suddenly suffocating. For the first time that night, the sound of the crowd wasn't echoing back excitement. It was absorbing weight. In that exact moment, as KJ prepared to pivot with another throwaway line to diffuse the tension, he saw the man stand. It was not abrupt, not out of rage, not the reaction of someone who felt publicly humiliated. The man stood the way someone does when they've carried a truth for too long, and the time to keep it quiet has finally expired. His motion was slow, precise, and deeply intentional, like a man rising not to confront, but to release something that had been buried in the dark for far too long. The crowd, previously lost in spectacle, now turned their eyes towards him. That was when people began to realize he wasn't leaving. He was walking toward the stage. Confusion spread in low murmurs. KJ instinctively stepped back half a pace, the smile still on his face, but its shape changed, warped by a flicker of uncertainty. The DJ glanced at the production manager. The production manager glanced at security. A staff member whispered, "Should we stop him?" But no one moved. No one dared. Despite having no microphone, no escort, no title announced, Ibrahim Traoré was becoming the center of gravity in the room. Somehow, without raising his voice or even changing his pace, he was pulling the energy of the entire stadium inward. And suddenly the music, the thing that had once consumed the air, felt like it had vanished. Each step he took on the stage was soundless, but felt like it echoed in the chest, like a heartbeat you hadn't noticed until now. Some people began filming, but their hands shook slightly. A woman clutched her purse and drew in a steadying breath. A child in his mother's lap stared with wide eyes, whispering, "What is he going to say?" And then he arrived. He stood in front of KJ Storm, just a few feet away. KJ, unsure whether to maintain the performance or drop it, tried to smile. But the smile was caught somewhere between polite and frightened. He didn't know if he should keep the mic or offer it. Ibrahim extended his hand, not in force, not in demand. But with quiet authority, KJ handed him the mic like a man handing over a match in a room soaked in gasoline, carefully and without resistance. 30,000 people held their breath. Everyone expected a clapback, a dramatic rebuttal, something sharp, a voice of authority to match the humiliation. But he didn't lift the mic like a battle cry. He didn't raise his arms or shift his posture. He stood as a man who simply had something to share, something that had waited long enough. And he began to speak. "I didn't come here to be welcomed." His voice was low, steady, like a quiet lake refusing to ripple. Not a shout, not a performance. Just a truth carried carefully. "I didn't come here to be praised. And I didn't come here to be on tomorrow's headlines." No one moved. Phones, which had been filming, stayed frozen in place. The streamers stopped narrating. From VIP guests to bleacher seats and across millions watching the live stream, all were now suspended in the same breathless pause. 3 days ago, I was sitting beneath a tree near the Mali border. There was no stage there, no music, just me and a boy named Jabari. His tone slowed but remained clear. He had no shoes, no parents, no home, just a stick he called his sword. He told me he walked 6 kilometers each morning to an abandoned clinic to see if there are any books left in the trash. Somewhere in the arena, someone swallowed hard. I asked him, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And he said, "I want to be a doctor so I can fix people like they fix bicycles." A faint laugh escaped from somewhere in the dark, but no one joined in. It wasn't funny. It was too painful to laugh at. Ibrahim scanned the faces before him. I asked him, "Why do you still try when you have nothing?" And he told me something I couldn't leave behind, something I carry with me still. He paused, raised his microphone a little closer, and said simply, "Because someone has to care." The words struck the room like a silent chord, trembling across every row, every chest, every pair of eyes. It was the kind of sentence you don't just hear, you feel. A young woman wiped her cheeks without knowing why. A husband reached for his wife's hand. A well-known singer tilted his head down, blinking fast. And KJ Storm, still standing off to the side of the stage, felt his palms go cold. The words he'd thrown so easily minutes before now echoed back to him, sharper, crueler, as if they'd been blades. Ibrahim didn't look angry. He looked open. "I didn't come here to stand beside stars," he continued. "I came here because somewhere a barefoot child still believes that someone will care." His voice began to tremble, not with fear, but with the gravity of memory. "If I can stand here today, then one day that boy can too. And if he can still say, 'I have hope,' then I can't be silent any longer." He stopped. No closing line, no dramatic finish, no thanks, no slogans, just a long, deliberate scan of the crowd, eye to eye, tear for tear. Then he handed the mic to a backstage staffer and began walking down the steps the same way he had climbed them, quietly, without fanfare. But this time, each step he took carried with it the weight of thousands of hearts breaking open in unison. And for the first time that night, people cried. Not for a song, not for a performance, but because of a story that refused to be forgotten. The concert ended in a way no one had planned. There was no triumphant closing act, no final explosion of lights and applause. Instead, silence lingered long after the last note faded. People filed out slowly, not speaking much. Some said nothing at all, while others mumbled under their breath, "I've never seen anything like that." Backstage was a storm of activity. PR managers scrambled to get in touch with Ibrahim Traoré, eager to schedule photo ops, exclusive interviews, and invite him to the VIP after-party at one of Lagos's most luxurious hotels. A black armored SUV waited near a side gate, ready to whisk him away in a show of recovered dignity, as if to patch over the embarrassment that had unfolded under the spotlight just an hour earlier. But Ibrahim declined, gently but without hesitation. "Thank you. I don't need the car. I don't need the suite. Take me where the doctors are, where people actually need someone to listen." His words stunned the team. A logistics assistant repeated the question, thinking maybe he had misheard. "You mean you want to ride with the medical transport?" He nodded. "If there's space." 30 minutes later, while celebrities posed with champagne glasses and bouquets, Ibrahim stepped quietly into a white van. The paint was faded, the door squeaked at the hinge, and the back seat was cushioned with worn foam. Inside sat two young doctors, a man and a woman in their late 20s, unsure how to speak with a president. It was Ibrahim who broke the silence first. "I'm not here to talk about politics," he said with a kind smile. "Just one question. What hurts people here the most? Things medicine alone can't fix?" The two doctors exchanged a look, and over the next long drive through winding dirt roads, they told him stories of children born outside hospitals, of pregnant women traveling 20 kilometers by ox cart to reach a midwife, of malaria patients lying unconscious without a single IV bag available. No cameras documented that ride. There were no live streams, but every word they spoke seemed to etch a deeper line into his gaze. By the time they reached the remote clinic, the sky had turned deep with night. The outpost sat far into the semi-desert, dozens of kilometers from the nearest populated town. The air carried the sharp scent of antiseptic, mixed with the dry earth and human sweat. A tired ceiling fan rotated above. Dim yellow lights buzzed. In the waiting room, a little girl lay curled on a cot, breathing fast, her eyes shut tight. "Her name's Amira," the female doctor whispered. "Severe malaria. We're waiting for IV medication, but the delivery truck got stuck in the mud this afternoon. It hasn't made it through." Without pause, Ibrahim asked, "How far away?" "About 30 kilometers," she replied. "Mostly dirt road. Some parts badly flooded. We plan to wait until morning." "No," he said firmly. "We go now." And so they did. The return trip was swallowed in darkness. The van's headlights flicked across scrubby trees and watchful animal eyes on the forest edge. When they arrived, they found the truck, an old, dented flatbed, tilted, its back tires submerged in a thick paste of deep red clay. Three men stood nearby, discussing how long they could wait for help. But Ibrahim didn't wait. He stepped out, removed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and walked over to a rusted shovel lying near a tree. No one stopped him, not because they were in awe, but because to stop him felt shameful. And so, beneath the hum of frogs and insects, the president of Burkina Faso began to dig. Mud splattered his face. Sweat soaked through his shirt. The shoes he had worn from Ouagadougou sank ankle-deep into muck. But he kept going. No one asked why. They simply joined him, digging, lifting rocks, shoving planks beneath the tires, clawing dirt with their bare hands. 4 hours later, the tires broke free. No one cheered. They were too exhausted. But when they turned to look at the man, caked in mud, soaked in sweat, eyes steady, every single one of them felt something shift inside. Smallness, humility, respect. The medicine reached the clinic before dawn. Amira was connected to an IV, Just as the horizon began to blush with morning, her breathing slowed, her lips regained color. She was still asleep, but her face looked less pale. A nurse stepped outside to thank Ibrahim, but he was already in the hallway wiping mud from his hands with a paper towel. "Where else needs help?" he asked. His voice was tired, but his eyes still burned bright. No journalist followed him. No one posed for photos. Only one boy, curious and silent, had tagged along in the van with an old phone borrowed from his cousin. From the edge of the clearing, the boy had filmed quietly as Ibrahim dug, frame by frame, without rest. The video was a minute long. It was shaky. The light was poor. But when the boy posted it to social media with the caption, "Our president digs for children. What does yours do?" it went viral like wildfire. While the rest of the world shared, reposted, and reacted in awe, Ibrahim Traoré had already left the media storm behind. No selfies, no press release, just a shirt stained with earth, a body drained by effort, and a heart still convinced of one quiet truth. If you want to change anything, you have to be willing to step into the dirt first. The hotel where KJ Storm stayed sat in the heart of Lagos, sleek, luxurious, with a marble floor lobby and a skylight that opened to the city's high-rise skyline. But the penthouse suite he was in felt far too large, too still, too hollow. The television was still on, but the sound had long since been muted. A glass of red wine sat on the table, untouched, its warmth gone. The glow of the city filtered through the windows and cast strange, flickering patterns across the cold floor. KJ sat motionless, staring at his phone. The video clip was only 7 minutes long, President Ibrahim Traoré's speech, and he had watched it nearly 30 times. Every time the words "because someone has to care" came up, his throat tightened. He found a second clip, shaky, blurry, filmed on an old phone, showing Ibrahim knee-deep in red mud, his face streaked with dirt, shirt soaked with sweat, digging with a rusted shovel. There was no camera crew, no press, just a man working in silence. And KJ, who had made an entire stadium laugh at that man, couldn't get one sentence out of his mind. "I mocked him, and he's out there building schools." He didn't sleep that night, didn't sing, didn't write, didn't post a thing. The next morning, he canceled everything. The press conference, the exclusive interviews, the rest of the tour. He left only one message for his manager: "I need to go, alone." He booked the flights himself, no PR team, no assistants, connecting flights, long hours, no business class, just a worn-out backpack, a blank notebook, and something pressing down on his chest that no melody could soothe. When he arrived in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, there were no photographers waiting, no welcome banners, no airport greeters. No one recognized him as the Afro Star headliner from just a night ago. A few people glanced at him with curiosity, but quickly looked away. He wandered through dusty streets on foot. The red earth clung to his shoes and pants. He asked for directions in broken French, using gestures and eye contact more than words. He had come to find Ibrahim Traoré, but Ibrahim wasn't at the presidential palace. He wasn't in any official building. There was no spokesperson. Every time KJ asked, the locals just smiled kindly, shook their heads as if they knew, but wouldn't tell. Eventually, in a small village called Saupan, nearly 100 kilometers from the capital, an old vegetable seller pointed toward the far edge of the village. "He might be over there," she said, "helping widows fix the water pump." KJ thought it was a joke, but when he followed the path past thickets and uneven dirt roads, he saw them. A group of elderly women crowded around a rusted metal pump, and in the center, bent over with his arms covered in grease and his shirt sleeves rolled high, was Ibrahim Traoré. No security perimeter, no aides, no political fanfare. Just a man repairing bolts, wiping parts clean, listening quietly as the women spoke of sons lost to violence and husbands taken by war. KJ stood frozen for a long time. He didn't know what to say, didn't dare walk closer. He felt like an outsider who had stumbled into a sacred place. One of the older women noticed him and gently took his hand. She whispered, "You're the one from the TV, aren't you? Sing something for us." A boy standing nearby looked up at him wide-eyed. "You're a singer, right?" KJ nodded, awkward and unsure. The boy smiled. "Then sing. Anything." There was no microphone, no backing track, no stage, just a few women on wooden stools, children playing in the bushes, and the man he once humiliated, now sitting calmly on the porch steps, scrubbing a water filter with a faded cloth. Ibrahim didn't speak, but he nodded gently. A permission without a word. So KJ Storm sang. Not a hit song, not a radio single. He sang a lullaby his grandmother used to hum when he was a child. An old, weathered tune no pop star had ever performed. His voice trembled. He forgot lines. He stumbled through verses. But no one laughed. No one criticized. They just listened. Quietly, completely. As though they heard something deeper than lyrics or melody. Something raw. Something honest. When the song ended, he didn't stand, didn't bow, didn't gesture. He simply stayed still, heart thudding. And for the first time in his life, KJ Storm understood what it meant to be a true artist. To sing, not to be heard, but to be understood. That morning, a thin veil of mist clung to the countryside of Zuno, like a sheer scarf wrapped gently around the earth. It wasn't a place marked on any tourist map. No bus stops, no directional signs, no guidebooks mentioned it. It sat tucked between anonymous hills, the kind of village even the wind seemed to forget. Yet it was precisely there, after 3 hours of walking along a narrow dirt path, no wider than an ox cart wheel, that Ibrahim Traoré arrived. In his hand was a half-full bottle of water, a faded cloth cap, and a question he didn't voice, not with words, but with his eyes. The children came first, not with noise or excitement, but with quiet curiosity. They emerged from behind thorn bushes, from under corrugated metal roofs, from makeshift classrooms with only 3 walls and a roof made of woven palm leaves. They didn't scream his name. They didn't ask for selfies. They looked at him like you would look at a kind stranger, someone who didn't come to speak but to listen. One little girl stood a few steps away. Her uniform was an old, sun-bleached white shirt, patched with green thread at the shoulder. On her feet were a pair of worn plastic sandals. One of the straps had broken and been tied back together with a strip of banana fiber. She didn't push through the crowd. She didn't call out. She just stood there, quietly clutching a tattered notebook to her chest. Ibrahim walked towards her. She looked up, just slightly. "My name is Nadia," she said. Her voice was soft, like wind brushing through dry bamboo. Then she opened the notebook and turned to the last page. There, sketched in pencil, wobbly but full of care, was a drawing of a school. It had a roof, windows, and a flag waving from the top. There was even a playground. Below it, written in uneven letters, were the words, "Our school, where rain doesn't wet the notebooks." He stared at that drawing for a long time. His eyes didn't blink, his lips pressed together. Then he asked gently, "How long have you been drawing this?" "2 months," she replied. "The real school collapsed. We study outside now, but I imagine it's still standing." He closed the notebook, placed his hand gently on her shoulder, and said, without promises, without grand declarations, but with warmth and certainty, "I'll come before it's finished." There was no public announcement, no broadcast, but word of Ibrahim's quiet promise spread faster than any radio signal. That very afternoon, people from across the village began bringing whatever they had: cracked bricks, old planks of wood, rusted wire. Some brought only a shovel. Some came with leftover rice wrapped in cloth. No one asked who was in charge. No one waited for a directive. Everyone knew, this time, they weren't building a school for the government. They were building it for themselves. Ibrahim didn't give a speech. He took off his jacket, wore a simple white shirt that quickly turned dusty, and began lifting bricks. He measured spaces with his hands, crouched low to set foundations. He didn't demonstrate for show. He worked with the quiet intensity of a father building something for his own daughter. By midday, the sky cracked open. Rain poured suddenly and fiercely, as if the entire season had arrived in a single downpour. Most assumed he would stop, but he didn't. His shirt clung to his back, water streamed from his hair, mud coated his face. Still he laid another brick, and another, one by one, until others returned. They didn't say anything, they just picked up tools. Some wore plastic ponchos. Others used banana leaves as umbrellas. No one could bear to stand and watch him do it alone. When the first wall rose to waist height, Nadia approached. She didn't say a word. She simply reached out and touched one of the wet bricks, then turned and wrapped her arms around him. No one filmed it. No one took a photo. But that moment became etched in the memory of the entire village. Because for the first time, a dream drawn in pencil was no longer just a sketch. It was growing out of brick, out of rain, and out of belief. If this touched your heart, even just a little, we ask for only one thing. Don't let it stop here. Subscribe to our channel for more real, soul-stirring stories that remind us of the power of compassion, dignity, and silent courage. And if you believe the world needs more leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, leave a comment below with just one word: hope. Let's flood the world with it. Disclaimer: this video is a transformative, creative retelling inspired by real humanitarian values in public leadership. It is intended for educational and emotional engagement under the principles of fair use. We do not claim official affiliation with any government figure or entity. All visual audio materials used are edited and repurposed for commentary, inspiration, and social reflection.